Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kyle Bechet, Communications Manager here at the Leadership Institute, and we are going to continue our conversation about storytelling. This time we'll be talking about strategic storytelling for fundraisers with our guest Nancy Bocskor. Nancy is the founder of the Nancy Bocskor Company. She's also a world traveler, just got back from Mongolia, and she tells me she's on her way to Cairo in 24 hours. And finally, she's also teaches at George Washington's Graduate School of Political Management. She also has a book with us on Go Fish, How to Catch and Keep Contributors, a Practical Guide to Fundraising, which is a great book to talk about, where she talks about, every practical fundraising tips and how you can break into the fundraising world. Throughout today's webinar, as always, you can ask us questions. You can ask Nancy questions by emailing live@leadershipinstitute.org and by tweeting using hashtag LIWebinar, or tweet directly at us saying @leadershipinst. And with that, we're going to get right into our program today with Nancy talking about storytelling and fundraising.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me over today.
It's great having you here. Always a pleasure.
So today we're going to talk about a little bit different aspect of fundraising, and that is how we incorporate storytelling into our fundraising, into our message, into our advocacy. And storytelling has come a long way. A lot of times when I used to say, let's create your story, people would go, no, voters want the facts. They want the facts. They want the figures. No, they want the story. They want to know about you. They want to know the story of the organization. And they want you to learn their story. So I've created a presentation called Tell Me a Story. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the art and science of fundraising. I just think this is a great meme. Stories make us more alive, more human, more courageous, and more loving. So stories help us set the stage for the messaging we need to create, and the messaging then helps you move towards advocacy and persuading people to give money. This is the art and science of fundraising. And what does this have to do with brain science? I work a lot with doctors who always go, oh, Nancy, it's not the art. It's not the story. People want to know, how do things work? And when I work in the conservative community, a lot of times people want to get the facts. It is a gazillion-dollar debt, all of these things. So for those that always question the soft side of messaging, I want to show them how brain science is an important part of storytelling. So one of the things we know, and a story that everyone knows, and I will share with you today, in 1748, the British politician and aristocrat John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, used a lot of his free time for playing cards. One of the problems he had was that he greatly enjoyed eating a snack while still keeping one hand for the card playing. So he came up with this idea to eat beef between 2 slices of toast, which would allow him to finally eat and play cards at the same time. Eating his newly invented sandwich, the popular name for 2 pieces of bread with meat in between, became one of the most world-renowned meals and inventions in the world. So what's interesting about this is that you are very likely to never forget the story of who invented the sandwich ever again, or at least are much more unlikely to do so. If I would have presented this into a bullet point of how to make a sandwich, it would have just gone in one ear and out the other. So for more than 27,000 years since the first cave paintings, people have been communicating via stories.
Yeah.
And we know in storytelling that it engages parts of our brain that commit things to memory. So if I just told you facts, only about half of your brain would be involved. Mm-hmm. If I tell you facts and figures using a story context, you're going to remember it. It's going to be seared into that memory. And so that's one of the great things about storytelling. You want to be memorable. You want people to remember why you're there and why you're running for office. So I think the brain science is very interesting on the Earl of Sandwich, card playing, and what it really has to do with brain science.
Right.
So I've now satisfied all of my doctors and people who do math for a living who want to know, why should we do a story? A good story can't be devised. It has to be distilled. And Raymond Chandler, the great murder mystery writer, coined this phrase, that if I got up here and just told you a story without any reality, it's all made up. So the more you tell a story, the more rich it becomes. So I think when your grandfather or your grandmother tells you all of those stories of, here's what, I had to trudge. Yes, here I had to trudge 10 miles in the snow to go to school and all that. That's not something that's devised. It's distilled for many, many years. So when we talk about fundraising and storytelling, there's a stat that I think is very interesting. There's a book that's called Made to Stick: Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. And it showed the power of storytelling as a way to create emotional bonds with donors and how that resonates with them. So the authors did a test. Participants were given $5, along with 2 versions of a fundraising letter for Save the Children. The first version included statistics about food shortages in Africa. The second version told the story of a single young girl. On average, the people who read the letter with the statistics contributed $1.14. The people who read the story contributed $2.38, more than twice as much. The reason is clear. The letter that told the story about the young girl put a human face on the cause and allowed readers to really connect emotionally with Save the Children's work. So, again, for my math and science, I want the facts, I need the stats. I want to put that human face on there. So this leads us to presenting data doesn't equate good storytelling, at the end of the day. So what's a good story? Well, the 5 steps to a good story include using a story structure. You find the story by looking at your data. Many years ago, I helped speech coach a first-time candidate named Connie Mack. Connie Mack was a bank president in Florida, and he was running for Congress in 1982. Connie Mack's a smart guy. He's a banker, and he got up and he was talking about how interest rates were nearly 20%, and really it was like an economist, right? And I remember I stopped him and I said, when interest rates are that high, people can't buy homes. Tell us a story how Patty and Richard can't buy a house because the interest rate means that it's unaffordable. Their mortgage is $2,000 instead of $1,500. And so I think that's important. And also with Connie Mack, I said, and really what people want to know, Mr. Mack, is how your grandfather founded Major League Baseball. Every time you give a speech, you need to talk about how your grandfather founded Major League Baseball. So you have data, and then you can create the story. And you also need to determine what is it that you want people to do as the result of this story. In our fundraising world, it's obviously give money. In advocacy world, it's take action. Mm-hmm. In voting world, vote for my candidate. And I actually write out a storyboard that I want to follow. What are the steps I want my listener to do as a result of listening to my story?
Right. What kinds of actions?
What are actions? And of course, I do use the data. That's why we love polling data, right? We look at the polls, but we don't just tell people stuff. We figure out how do we put a human face on that. Second, you need to be authentic. Your story will flow. It goes back to the Raymond Chandler quote. It can't be devised. It has to be distilled. It has to be real. So you make it personal. You make it emotional. You start with an anecdote or a metaphor, something that draws your audience in.
I think that's a very important point, because a lot of times when I listen to stories, there's a lot of good stories out there, but then a lot of times I start hearing a story about how somebody rambles on and on and on, and they just don't have a point to the story, and I've fallen asleep in my chair because they've gone into the 10th generation of their family, which had nothing to do with the original story.
It is. People go on rabbit trails, right? And that's one reason we do the storyboard. What is the major thing you want your audience to remember after you tell the story? So we take the data, and authenticity is rooted in the facts. The facts are rooted in the data, and how do you incorporate that? But it has to come from your heart. It can't be the, I'm going to say ramblings of a PhD in economics, because I'm kind of jealous, because I'll never have a PhD in economics, but I want to have it from the heart. The third step is, how are you visual? People are visual learners. We learn by, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So in this instance, I use pictures, graphs, charts when possible, and you design it for instant readability. There's nothing more frustrating when somebody sends me an Excel spreadsheet in 6-point type. And then I'm trying to open it up, it won't print. So in this chart, we see that the trolls dominate the voter groups, followed by the elves, gremlins, orcs, dragons, and billy goats. But it's easy to read. It's not just a lot of lines and information.
Right.
So you want that connection. How do you communicate the data, but in a visual way? The fourth step, well, we want to make it easy for the audience to follow it. Telling a story should be simple and direct, and your recall and action will be much stronger. And to your point, I stick to 2 to 3 key issues and how they relate to the audience. I'm never going to get up and go, here's my 43-point plan to cut the deficit, because you've lost people on number 2.
Lost me when you tell me that
Yeah.
you have 43.
43, I'm like going, when will it be over? Is it time for a snack?
Right.
And make it easy to follow. Don't make people jump through hoops. You want them to be able to have a direct understanding, not sit there and go, did he really mean this, or does he want me to do this? So be simple. My 5th step is invite and direct discussion, especially in this world of social media. It's 24/7. So you focus on highlighting what your audience needs, what are the key facts to the story, and then figure out, okay, what can we do to communicate this? What's our hashtag? What's the major point? Yesterday, unfortunately, with the whole Ray Rice incident, it was why I don't leave was the hashtag on the number of battered women who just don't leave.
Right.
So that started a conversation. Yesterday we had a nationwide conversation on spousal abuse. So it really invited the entire nation to have that conversation. Joined in. And so they continued the discussion beyond just what was on the news that night.
Right.
So those are just some 5 steps, and now we'll go into more detail on how I weave these together. So I remind everyone, there's a superhero inside of all of us. We just need the courage to put on the cape. Stories about your life, how you make your life connect to voters. Not that you're the one who's driving the Ferrari and all that. No, what is it you have in common with the people? So with the people you're trying to ask for money or for a vote. So I always just tell everybody, go put that cape on and let's get started. Because one of the best storytellers ever is Stan Lee from Marvel Comics. And a few years ago, it was Marvel Comics celebrated the 50th anniversary of the comics, and Stan Lee was interviewed. And what I find fascinating about telling the superhero stories, no matter where I am in the world, whether it's Mongolia, Egypt, Bolivia, everyone knows about Marvel Comics, right? Spider-Man is worldwide. So let's follow what Stan Lee said in his interview about how to create a great page turner. So Stan Lee's advice was, number 1, a great guy or girl trying to do something. Number 2, facing insurmountable odds, right? There's always somebody.
Story of the little guy.
Who keeps getting into trouble as they are going on their quest. So the reader keeps wondering, how is he or she going to get out of this one? We're sitting at the edge of our seats. Until after a lot of suffering along the way, there's a victory. And we have to, and when I say victory of sorts, it's because not everything's going to be 100%.
Right.
We need to celebrate small victories. And a woman that, Katja Andreessen, who's a great marketing fundraiser, she said this as she looked at this Stan Lee advice. Stan Lee focused his career on superheroes, but this advice surely fits your story. If you're trying to advance a cause, you know it's a heroic struggle. You're on a journey to a far-off destination that may never be reached in your lifetime. It may be into poverty, disease, or prejudice. There are a lot of obstacles along the way, and the quest is fraught with challenges, but you have your small victories just the same. Are you telling your organization or your candidate's story as a dramatic struggle against the odds and celebrating the victories? Because you should be. Put on that cape. You're a superhero. Take it from Marvel Comics. You've got a rip-roaring page-turner all around you. Tell the tale with drama and the high stakes it surely merits, because you want everyone pulling for you every step of the way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what makes, as candidates, as fundraisers, it's I want my donor, I want the voter to pull for me.
Right.
And they're not going to just do that if you're communicating in facts and figures. You want them to want to like you.
They need to have some depth to what they're talking about.
To have some depth. So let's talk about Harry Winston. Now, Harry Winston was one of the most famous jewelers in the world about mid-century. In fact, Marilyn Monroe sings about Harry Winston in the movie, in one of her movies. So let's listen to Harry Winston's story. Harry Winston, of course, one of the top jewelers in the world, had found a diamond of rare beauty. And he knew that there was a wealthy Dutch merchant who was looking for a certain kind of stone. Winston called the merchant, told him he thought he had the perfect stone for him to come to New York and look at, and invited the collector to see it. The collector flew to New York, and Winston assigned a salesman to meet him and show him the diamond. When the salesman presented the diamond to the merchant, he described the expensive stone by pointing out all of its fine technical features. The merchant listened, praised the stone, but turned away and said, "It's a wonderful stone, but it's not exactly what I wanted," as the salesman was talking about cut and clarity and all of that. Winston, who was watching this transaction from across the store, stopped the merchant and asked, "Do you mind if I show you the diamond once again?" The merchant agreed, and Winston presented the same stone. But instead of talking about the technical features, Winston spoke from the heart about his own genuine admiration of the diamond and what a rare thing of beauty it was. Abruptly, the customer changed his mind and bought the diamond.
Amazing.
While he was waiting for the diamond to be packaged and brought to him, the merchant turned to Winston and asked, "Why did I buy it from you when I had no difficulty saying no to the salesman?" Winston replied, "The salesman is one of the best men in the business, and he knows more about diamonds than I'll ever know. I pay him a good salary for what he knows, but I would gladly pay him twice as much if I could put into him something that I have and he lacks. You see, he knows diamonds, but I love diamonds." So much of your fundraising success revolves not just around knowing your candidate or your cause, but loving what you're doing. People can see that sincerity when you're meeting with them. Build your case of support. Make that emotional connection, because we can all follow Harry Winston's advice. Decisions come from the heart and not the head.
I think that's absolutely true.
It is. It is. So many people, when they ask for money because they hate it, they're so scared. It's like, "Hello, I'm really sorry to bother you today, but I'm running for state senate, and well, I know it's Girl Scout cookie time, and the church needs new hymnals, but I'd appreciate some financial assistance, but if you can't do it, it's okay." And then they wonder why everyone thinks they're loser girl, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you have to be glad to be there.
Right.
Harry Winston's glad to be there. He loves what he does.
Right.
And for candidates, that sincerity has to be there, or you're not going to raise any money. So, Jerry Panis, who is 80-some years old, he's known as the maniac in chief of new ideas at the Institute for Charitable Giving in Chicago, is one of the top nonprofit fundraisers in the world. And I had the opportunity to attend one of his 4-day fundraising seminars many years ago. And the most important thing I took away was this: storytelling is the fiber of relationship building. Everyone has a story. You need to ask questions. Because part of asking questions, I call it my version of sorority rush, right? Name, hometown, and major, just like I did with the cameramen here today. Tell me where you're from. Oh, I've been there. Where are you from? Raleigh. Where'd you go to school? Oh, I know where Redding, California is. I do that with every person I meet because I want to hear their story. Right. How did you end up being here? So part of all of that is creating a great first impression. When people say, what's the secret of fundraising success? I always just tell them, if you don't believe in yourself and the cause you're representing, no one else is going to. You have 21 seconds to make a first impression. So you better be walking in like you're an Olympic star. Be glad to be there. Make eye contact. Have a firm handshake. And that leads us to, what did Dale Carnegie and Uno the Beagle have in common? So if you have not read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, you should go get it today. It is still on the New York Times bestseller list. And by the way, Dale Carnegie started his company in 1912, and he most recently wrote a new book called How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age. That's how powerful Dale Carnegie is. He's writing books from the grave, and we're friends on Facebook. So Dale Carnegie sends me some kind of update every day, just a piece of advice, and I find it very helpful. So of all the things I've read about Dale Carnegie, my favorite is this. Dale Carnegie used to advise his students to greet every stranger with the enthusiasm of a puppy dog. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that you start licking the faces of potential donors, but if I had a black lab puppy, I'd raise more money, right? Be glad to be there. Right. Be enthusiastic. So what's this have to do with Uno the Beagle? A few years ago, Uno the Beagle was the first beagle to ever make the finals of the Westminster Dog Show. So here he comes out. Uno the Beagle is heads high, tail high, arf, arf, arf. I'm Uno the Beagle. I'm a good-looking stud of a dog. I'm going to beat the shih tzus and the poodles. And he's like barking. And you're really not supposed to be barking. But he had such presence, personality, and charm that 3,000 plus people at Westminster Dog Show stood up and gave a dog a standing ovation.
That is amazing. And
I will never forget thinking, I knew that Dale Carnegie book was in more than 100 languages, but it really is in dog language, right? But I'll never forget that night. And Uno went on to become he was named Best in Show. So it was just be glad to be there. And I can't say that enough because people are always, you can tell, my friend Deb Sofield is an executive speech coach, and she always turns around when she speaks. And she says, am I speaking am I smiling now or am I frowning? Because when you're not smiling, that comes across in everything, even on the phone.
People see body language.
Right, and they don't even have to see it. They can hear it when you're calling somebody. You can, you can find, perky goes a long way, and when you're smiling and nice, that depends on, it's the tonation, your intonation.
I know a lot of times when I'm listening to people, if they're not passionate about it, why should I be passionate about it?
Exactly. Why would I write you a check?
Right.
Why would I go out in 100-degree temperature and walk a parade for you?
Right. Or I'm from the Northeast. Why would you go in below freezing temperatures?
Exactly.
On Get Out the Vote weekend.
Exactly. So part of all of this is something I learned from my time. Newt Gingrich actually gave me my first job out of college 35 years ago. Thank you. I was a child prodigy. But one of the things I learned from Newt that I incorporate in fundraising is this leadership model. And that is you listen, learn, help, and lead. You listen by asking questions. You develop appreciative understanding that when someone's talking to you, you're actually focused on them. You're not like going, oh, is there somebody else more important to talk to down the receiving line? Right. But you need to listen carefully. Because when you listen, when you talk to a senior citizen, the senior citizen is going to be the expert on Social Security. We're not. So you learn from these folks. You process what you've heard, remember it, and learn from it. Because these are your experts. If you go to Debbie's Donuts at 7 a.m., chances are they're going to be talking about snow removal, garbage collection, or the potholes in the roads. So if you're running for city council, perhaps that's what you need to be talking about, and not foreign policy somewhere, right?
I think a lot of times people just forget the listening part. I mean,
yes.
I assume like you're running for office. you should know the problems, and the only way to know the problems is to listen to the
Exactly.
people about the problems.
Don't come in with your own agenda.
Right.
That's your agenda. That's not necessarily the voter's agenda.
Exactly.
So you listen, you learn, and then you figure out, how can I help this person? How can you be a catalyst in getting something done? And I'm always amazed, and maybe it's because, my mother and dad always just said, pick up the phone. And in this world of texting and tweeting, there's so little personal communication that if I pick up the phone and call someone, I can figure out, what is it I need to fix? Much more efficient. And when you phone someone, you know the context.
Right.
Emails, there's no context, and there's a lot of people who get upset because they misread something.
Yeah. I much prefer going and having a face-to-face conversation with somebody in the office rather than emailing them from 3 computers down.
Exactly. So you figure out, what can you do to help? Because if you're running for office, people expect you to help them. And for most people who are running, I go, what is it you've done in your community? Not just join the Lions Club. What did you do? You headed up Pancake Feed to buy eyeglasses for kids. So what do you do to help? So after you've listened, learned, and helped, all of a sudden you're a leader one day. You will almost always be asked by others to lead them because they see you can get things done. And if you're someone who can get things done, we're going to invest in your campaign. We may vote for you. We may take action on your issue. So I just always think that's a good leadership model to follow as we are developing emotional connections. And as you said, one of my favorite sayings, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You need to listen twice as much as you speak. And for politicians, that's hard because, first of all, you have that little bit of anxiety, right? I want everyone to think I'm smart and know what's going on. And secondly, you have to have a pretty healthy ego or you're not running for office anyhow. And so you want everyone to think you are the smartest one in the room. And I'd rather have people think you care about them. And then they can learn that, he cares and he's smart.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes you look at, elections and the candidate that wins is the one that polls better on who cares about me more.
Exactly. Well, and there's that old story that there's always the poll every year. Who would you rather have a beer with in your backyard?
Right.
Right? So George Bush or John Kerry? Well, everybody's going, hey, let's go have a beer with Bush. So unfortunately in 2008, it was people would rather have a cocktail with Obama than John McCain. And I know for our community, the hardcore conservatives that value the Constitution and everything we stand for, that's a hard thing. Because what is it that you need people to do? But you still have to be able to communicate in a clear, concise, caring manner.
Right.
I like this little meme I found too. The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand. We listen to reply. So we're always in defense mode, right? Somebody's going to say something to us. We better have our answer prepared so we sound smarter or we're able to stop the attacks. And I think sometimes we just need to understand what people are saying, and you can do that. We may not always agree with someone, but there really is, you can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
In a polite way.
I agree 100% with that.
So in the world of fundraising, I have replaced cold calling with something I call warm communication. Your ability to make emotional connections with potential supporters can move them from concern to passion to cash. Now, in advocacy world, I say your ability to make emotional connections with potential supporters can move them from concern to passion to action. And how do we get to that stage? So for many of you who have watched webinars or have heard me speak, this is my story. Meet Saeed. Saeed lives in Istanbul, Turkey, and I first met Saeed 7 years ago. I was in Turkey to train 20 women from Algeria, Morocco, and Jordan who were going to run for parliament. And I had a day off, so I go to the Sultan's Palace. The Sultan's Palace is huge in Istanbul. And I go in, and everything is Turkish or Arabic, and I don't even know where to start at the museum. So, and there's really long lines. So I go out, and there's Saeed holding a sign that says, I speak English. So we negotiated. So I was able to hire Saeed for $30 for the afternoon. So Saeed's great. We walk in, and the first thing he said is, so Miss Nancy, tell me what you do for a living. And at the time, I was still working for many members of Congress, raising their money. But as I told him, my real passion is helping women achieve success in public service. And he said, well, how interesting that you do that, Miss Nancy, because I work for a member of Parliament during the week. I just earn extra money being a tour guide over the weekend. So immediately, he's creating 1 degree of separation. He may live in Turkey, I may live here or in the United States, but we have something in common. So Saeed's great. Not hard to believe I'm a type A personality. I do not like lines, right? Thank you for anyone that lets me have global entry or the TSA expedited. I just don't want to stand in lines. So Saeed's wonderful. He cuts me in front of all the lines. So I can see the second largest diamond in the world or the sword that is encrusted with emeralds. And he's explaining everything he's seeing. It's just fabulous. And again, we keep going to the fronts of the lines so he can be the tour guide. And then he says, Nancy, Miss Nancy, do you need something to drink? And I said, yes, I like water, but I don't want any gas. I don't want any bubbles in it. Ah, Miss Nancy, let me find you some flat water, which he did. And then I said, is there a ladies' restroom, preferably with a Western-style bathroom? And he says, yes, I know where the Western-style bathroom is. So he takes me there. So, he's doing a great job here. The cutting in line, water, bathrooms. And about halfway through the tour, he says, so, Miss Nancy, have you bought a rug since you have been in Istanbul? And I said, listen, I've got cats. At the time, I even had a rabbit. I said, I do not need nice rugs in my house. So we started touring some more, and he said, is there something you haven't seen since you've been here? And I said, well, I've been surprised that I haven't seen more encrusted, jeweled fabric, like the gowns, the robes. He says, the exhibit is closed today, but let me call someone. So, of course, he's calling somebody, and all of a sudden, they're opening up this exhibit and turning on the lights so the American visitor can see the beautiful gowns. So we're still kind of roaming around the museum, and then he goes, Miss Nancy, my uncle, he owns the finest rug store in Istanbul, and he will be very angry with me if I don't show you his wares. So as we've already walked through, lines, water, bathrooms, exhibits that are closed. So I go, okay, I will go to the rug store, but I'm not buying anything. So we walk down the street, 5 stories of rugs. And I'm going, I don't have time for 5-story rugs. No worries, Miss Nancy. We have a beautiful showroom on the 2nd floor. Well, I walk into the store. I'm greeted by 10 men, including the uncle that says, Miss Nancy, welcome to my store. Yes, there was some texting going on. The guy knew my name. So we start up the steps. And his first question to me was, so Miss Nancy, tell me, from what country do you come? Now, as I've reflected on this, my father was Hungarian. I couldn't look more Eastern European. I look like I just got off the boat at Ellis Island. And if I would have said I am Hungarian, he would have said, Nancy, Budapest, such beautiful twin cities. But no, of course, I said I am an American. Miss Nancy, I love America. I have lived in Charleston and New Orleans, beautiful cities. And my brother, he has a rug store in Seattle. You should go see him. So what is he doing? He's personalizing this, right? We have things in common. So we go upstairs, I sit on the giant couch, here comes the baklava, here comes the tea, and men start spinning giant rugs. Here are the wool rugs, here are the silk rugs, here are the cotton rugs. And he's chatting me up. Miss Nancy, what brings you here? Well, I'm here to train 20 women from Morocco, Algeria, and Jordan who are running for parliament. And he says, now, is that what you do? Yes, I've traveled to more than 20 countries, and my passion is helping women achieve success in public service. And he says, now, have you ever seen rugs like this? Well, yes, I've been to Turkey, but no one has this beautiful rugs as we do here in this store. I said, they're lovely, I don't need a rug. And then he says, Miss Nancy, have you ever seen a rug being made? And I said, well, yes, I've seen rugs being made in Egypt. I was taken to a vocational education center. In America, we call that child labor, but in Egypt, it's a vocational education center where a 7-year-old's making a rug. Egyptians, bad rugs. Our rugs are just beautiful. Yes, they're lovely rugs. I don't need any rugs. Miss Nancy, I have not sold any rugs today. If you buy a rug, we'll both have good luck. Yes, I understand, but I don't need a rug. And then people keep spinning rugs. And I said, I got to tell you, you keep showing me all these green and blue and burgundy rugs when my house is pink. And just like magic, here comes a pink rug. And the guy's going, Miss Nancy, I see that this rug, it is speaking to you. Oh, I can see your eyes twinkling. You will give this rug an excellent home. You see, you've picked a very special rug. It is not just silk, it is double silk. The back is as beautiful as the front. Yes, it's a lovely rug, it's pink, but I don't need any rugs. And mind you, I'm in there like an hour and a half at this point, thinking there is no escape. And after listening to me, because he really did listen twice as much as he spoke, he then said the magic words, Miss Nancy, it took a woman 8 months to make this rug, and she's a widow with many children. How do you get into my heart? You get in with helping women. My house is like a women's art gallery. So when I go to foreign countries, I am not making a deal on a painting or a quilt. I'm just giving her money for it because I know, because I'm a crafter, how much time and effort it takes. So then I try to make this an intellectual decision. Looking at the rug, thinking, okay. And I said, okay, tell me, how much do you want for the rug? And he said, $1,200. And, you know, I didn't just come out of the Cabbage Patch yesterday. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm going, what about $500? Oh, Miss Nancy, look at the back, look at the front. That's beautiful, $800. And I said, too much. So finally, we agreed upon $600 for the rug. So today, as I lean over on camera, I bring you a $600 rug. Yes, there is a slide of Katarina, my cat, on the $600 rug. Now, I know you're stunned in the audience. There's always questions. Nancy, did you see the rug before you bought it? Yes, I bought a frickin' placemat size rug. Nancy, is there a big rug at home and this one, you know, like is the sample? No, I bought a frickin' placemat size rug. Nancy, did you wash the rug and it shrink? No, my friends, I bought a fricking placemat size rug, which I will carefully lay down here. Now, in all of this, I'm in suspended disbelief, right? I'm pretending I'm in a movie because in my head, he's persuaded me that it's taken a woman 8 months to make this rug because he had gotten into my heart. I go downstairs, we do all the paperwork. Every year, I get a Christmas card from the Muslim carpet dealer. And in case, for those of you who don't know, a Muslim Christmas card is always Santa on a camel, okay? No matter where I go in the Middle East in January, there's always Santas on camels throughout the hotels. So every year, I get a note saying, Miss Nancy, thank you for buying the beautiful double silk pink rug. This is what you call great customer service, right?
That is amazing.
It's amazing. Thanks me every year.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, my phone rings. Miss Nancy, yes, this is Saeed. Who? Saeed, I was your tour guide at the Sultan's Palace in Istanbul. And I'm thinking it's like I'm being punked and Ashton Kutcher's on the phone, right? I'm going, no, who really is this? No, you bought the beautiful double pink silk rug from my uncle. And he remembered all these details. And I said, yes. He says, I'm here in Richmond, Virginia. May I come to see you? I brought some rugs. And of course I started laughing, but I said, you know what? I was always a good fundraiser. But meeting your uncle, I learned how to become a great fundraiser. How do you grab your heart? Now I tell people your heart is closer to your wallet than your head. And for fundraising decisions, it's often from the heart.
Absolutely.
So the story's almost done, but there's a couple more pieces. First of all, every time I go to Seattle, I'm convinced I'm going to be, kidnapped and forced to buy more rugs because they just know I'm there. But second, my mother, who's very thrifty, was going to hear me give a speech in Indianapolis. And I knew if my mother found out I spent $600 on a placemat size rug, she'd take my passport away, even if I am a grown-up. So I had to pull her into the bathroom before the speech and tell her she could not stand up in the middle of the speech and start yelling at me, right? Like, I raised you better, how did you do this? And of course, she still remembers the rug, and it does have its own insurance policy, and it's never in checked luggage. So the final part of this story is, a few months ago, I get an email at my old AOL account, which I haven't used in years. And it's from Saeed. And he was starting his own tour guide business now. So I email him back because I'm curious. First of all, I wanted to make sure it wasn't like a scammer. But I said, send me your photo. And he says, why? And I said, I just want to make sure you're not a scammer. And he sends me a same photo I just showed you, except a little older. And he said, why did you want it? And I said, you will never know how famous you are in America. Because I tell this story all the time on how your ability to make personal, emotional connections can move potential donors from concern to passion to cash. And this rug, it was the best $600 I ever spent because I couldn't pay for a fundraising lesson in the amount of what I've learned here.
This is amazing. I cannot believe that anybody was able to use a story to get a $600 placement size rug.
Exactly. And you know, I travel all the time and I walk out of a lot of stores. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am not easily persuaded. And it is interesting, and I think for a lot of the folks around the world, this is life and death. If they do not sell things, they don't feed their family.
Right.
And I am always very aware of that. When I went back to Cairo a couple of years ago to teach with a colleague, we asked our cab driver to take us to the Grand Bazaar. Well, instead of taking us to the Grand Bazaar, he took us to his uncle's Grand Bazaar gift shop. And we walk in, and there they had papyrus. Just look at the papyrus. And his spiel was, I'm going to get married tomorrow. I will give you a special price. So it just made us both laugh. So it's a remarkable story. So far, the rug has survived all these years, mm-hmm. But I cherish this because it taught me more that day than I would have ever done in any fundraising class. And I see you've got a couple questions. Why don't we take those while then we'll go through some more?
We have one question from our audience. Thank you for sending that in. Again, please send more in. If you are just given a short slot of time to introduce yourself and what you do, what is the easiest way to segue into your story if you work for an organization with multiple ministries, like 3 or 4?
Well, I think you need to pick which one is most important. Mm-hmm. Not just to you, but which one do you think, given your, I like to, God created Google so I can find out about anything.
Right.
If you're let's say you are given the opportunity to speak to the Lions Club. I know this from experience because now I'm a Lions Club member. My mom and dad were. Their issue was eyesight. So if you went to speak to the Lions Club, maybe you could talk about how your ministry helps people buy eyeglasses. So it's all about the audience.
Right.
Find out what their needs are, how you can craft a story to weave them in, because you know they're interested in that. So that's always my first tip. Know your audience, do your research, figure out a way for you to craft your story, even if it's a short amount of time, because you don't want to spend an hour going, our church was founded in 1843. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just cut to the chase.
Right.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
Right.
Let me tell you about the lives we've helped or people we've saved.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. Minimize the fluff, know the audience of who you're talking to. I mean, you don't want to go into a room of millennials and start talking about senior citizen issues. Just, Google beforehand, I think, is absolutely the best thing you have going
Or
for you.
If someone has invited you, talk to that person. What is it that, find out. I mean, again, ask questions.
Yes.
What are the things you are concerned about? So I can be sure that I cover that. When I do presentations, I always, what is your focus as an organization? So I can figure out, how do I tailor my remarks to address your concerns?
Right.
Because then I'm in your heart.
Right, exactly.
Great.
And I encourage people to continue sending in their questions. Use live@leadershipinstitute.org. Nancy's great at this stuff. You heard the story about the rug. I'm sure she'll have great points for any of your questions.
Yes, I'm happy to help. So, stories allow our imperfections to be set in a context that shows we're still good people. Remember, we need to celebrate our small victories. We are not going to solve problems overnight. And so stories show, I'm not 100% there. I've done some things wrong, but here's what I'm trying to do to be a better person. So it's another great way to communicate, especially if there's conflict. If it's a difficult situation, if you're dealing with a difficult customer or a coworker, what is it that we can do to find common ground? The world is shaped by 2 things: stories told and the memories they leave behind. It's all about the memories, and you need to be memorable. Figure out what that story is. We want people to vote for you. We want people to give you money. But if you're just like, oh yeah, just whatever, you sent me facts and figures, it's not going to be seared in my brain. And I want to leave you with a couple more slides. Just another story. You know, I work with a lot of women around the world and, of course, in the United States, encouraging them, inspiring them, training them how to run for office. And as I told you, I was in Turkey in 2007 training women from the Middle East. I was then assigned to 6 women from Jordan, where I served as their mentor for 6 months. And via Skype and other web conferencing tools, we would have phone calls. So it would be Friday morning, and I'd be having my coffee, and here, you know, the cats would walk across the screen. But I would advise people, how do you run for office? Because these are folks in many parts of the world, they didn't have 7th grade student council election. What we do as Americans just every day is phenomenal. And I always want to remind Americans, we really are very lucky. So when I first met Reem, who's the woman here with the headscarf, I asked her, just like I do anyone, what is your concern? What is the major challenge facing your community? And of course, as it is in many parts of the world, it's corruption. And I always go, I'm sorry, I do not have the anti-corruption magic wand today. And I said, what does that really mean? And one of her issues was vote buying, that it's so poor in many parts of the world that you receive food baskets or money if you vote the way that you have been paid. And of course, me, the cynic, goes, well, how do you know the person has voted that way? Everybody in the world has a cell phone, right? You go in and you click, you voted the way you said you were going to, and you get a payment. And she said, I'm running as an independent, I don't have a party, but I want to fight this corruption. So her message for 6 months was, I will never buy your vote, nor will mine ever be for sale. The whole thing was on ethics and standards and bettering the community, not bettering herself. I visited Jordan a few weeks before the election, and I went to a rally in Zarqa, Jordan on a Saturday night, and there were thousands of people in a town square. All the men were on one side, all the women were on the other, and all these small children were surrounding me because here's an American, no headscarf, and they all wanted to practice English with the visiting American. So I'm surrounded by small boys who were like taller than me, more or less. And here was this woman who got up and captivated the audience in a speech about how she was going to serve them. So I go back to America, and the great news was Reem was the top woman vote getter in Jordan and the youngest woman in parliament. But the bad news was her gorgeous husband here was murdered 4 days before the election. She had received lots of death threats to pull out. And she called me that day, and we had a translator. And I just, she says, I'm not going to pull out. I've worked too hard. I will do this in the honor of my husband. She had 3 kids under 10, but she also had 11 brothers and sisters that made up the campaign team. And so Reem went on and stayed in the race. So when she came to America for a meeting, I was so excited to see her, and I know no Arabic, and she knows this much English, and I offered to drive her to Dulles Airport. And all she said is, will you take me bargain shopping first? So nothing like going to a TJ Maxx and a Marshall's and filling up like 4 shopping carts. I'm very good at shopping and shipping. But she wanted to buy something for her family. And she has been a very passionate voice to fight the system. And so when Americans in particular tell me, oh, it's so hard to run for office, right? Oh, you have to raise money, and I have to talk to people, and people are mean. I go, yeah, let me tell you what the reality is around the world in the 20-plus countries I work in. But in terms of personal stories, my experience with Reem has never been. It will always be the most important work that I have done. And I always want to share that when people go, yeah, it's hard. Well, guess what? It is hard. Anything you want really bad is hard. So why should I tell you a story? Research shows that listeners will remember 65 to 70% of the information shared through a story. Chances are you will run into me and go, how's that pink rug? Because I hear that everywhere I go in the United States. But only 5 to 10% of listeners will remember information if they're conveyed by just facts and figures. So it's very important to weave the stories. Here's my contact information. This is me practicing to be a cowboy back when I was about 3 years old on Tony the Horse. There is my email and my website. If you're interested in buying a book, I am happy to give Leadership Institute viewers a discount of $32. It includes shipping. It is 77 pages. It's less than 50 cents a page of great information so you can learn how to raise money for your organization. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we have time for
Oh,
one
perfect.
last question, so let's get right to it. Are there any other books or resources you can recommend for people developing promotional materials or storytelling for nonprofits? Where can we find your books or publications?
Well, there's my website, and I'm happy for you to email me. Take a look at Jerry, and he goes by Gerald, so it's Jerold Panas, Panas. When I teach my fundraising class, I use 2 of his books. One is a 59-minute guide to basically asking for money. And the other one is called Power Questions. What questions do you need to ask the potential donor so you can craft a message? I subscribe to a lot of blogs about storytelling and fundraising, and I'm happy to share those resources with you if you just pop me a note.
Great. Well, thank you, Nancy,
Thank
for
you very
coming.
much for having me here.
This was wonderful. I think our viewers loved it. I hope they loved it. As always, this webinar was recorded and will be available online for your viewing at a later time at leadershipinstitute.org/activism-on-demand. Also, if you want to continue talking about fundraising and learning about fundraising, next week the Leadership Institute has the Comprehensive Fundraising School. Carol Way, the director of this webinar, will also be in charge of that training, so you can email her and ask her more if you'd like to know about that. Finally, our next webinar will be at 3 p.m. Wednesday, October 1st. This will be on how to write headlines that sell with Josiah Ryan, who is an editor at The Blaze and former Campus Reform editor here at the Leadership Institute. With that, thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you next time. And we're done.
Bye-bye.